Welcome to the Two Grumpy Bastards podcast, where feelings aren't felt and snowflakes melt. Buckle up, it's gonna be a bumpy ride.
They painted over ants.
Welcome to the Two Grumpy Bastards podcast for those of you on the YouTube side, so we don't violate copyright. That Russ and I just listened to a snippet of Revolution Calling by Queensryche from their monumental, ridiculously life-changing concept album, Operation Mindcrime. It's been 30 plus years since that album came out. Funny thing about that, Russ, to me, is a lot of those lefty bands back in the day, if you listen to some of that music, like Queensryche, they had no idea that they'd be talking about the Democratic Party in that Revolution Calling and the and rise up against your oppressors.
Yeah, that's kind of prescient, just in a different way. I half expected you to play "It's the End of the World as We Know It" by REM.
We've been there.
But it was a little bit hard to understand the lyrics. You had to kind of concentrate on the lyrics. They have been talking about DC at any point over the last 50 to 100 years, basically.
Yeah.
But I did have to really focus to listen to the lyrics. I think the guitar, I think the electric guitar kind of overshadowed the song a little bit.
I'm a big Queensryche fan from back in the day. They were a Seattle band. This was prior to the grunge movement. They were one of the few beacons of popularity and hugely influential. Saw them in concert, which is kind of ironic. I saw them in concert when I was in college with a group of buddies over at the famous Gorge in George, Washington, a little town called the Gorge in George. And it's an amazing venue, outdoor amphitheater on these granite bluffs above the Columbia River and the Columbia River Canyon there. And it was Rock the Environment. That was the name of the concert. And they had all these bands, very famous bands, doing we talked about this last time, and I put a meme up on our Facebook, ding, 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 Facebook group, Two Grumpy Bastards, Facebook group. And, back then they were trying to raise the money to combat the fact that we were going to lose the planet in 10 years. But anyway, Queensryche was there, and they were definitely very lefty and very pro-environment, which there's nothing wrong with being pro-environment. As I tell people, I'm an environmentalist, absolutely. I'm just not an alarmist climate change freak.
You're not an apocalyptic environmentalist.
Not even slightly. But protect it, do everything you can, be responsible stewards, of course, which, means things like, cleaning up the forest so they don't burn the entire forest down like happening in Canada, like happens in California every year. Things like that. But no, it's just kind of ironic. I was thinking about that and the things that we're going to talk about today. There was a revolution calling, of course. People can look at my background, and it's time to get the band back together. We're getting very close to the precipice. Never thought a revolution would be coming from the right, I can tell you that, but it looks like it might be happening. So, and by the way, I am drinking Diet Dr. Pepper. You can tell that it's time for me to go grocery shopping when I'm down to like, I think I got this for free or on a camping trip or something from somebody that didn't want it, because I won't throw anything away. I just won't do it.
At least it's not like Sam's Club Diet Dr. Cola.
We fucking drink that over that. That's disgusting. I don't mind a good Dr. Pepper every now and again to throw it, but that doesn't even taste like anything. Anyway, yeah. I'm probably drinking like Roundup or, Probably. So why don't you go ahead and lead in? We got a big topic to kind of to talk about today.
Okay, well, there's gonna be a lot of folks that may not be happy with what I have to say.
Oh, really?
First of all, let's start with the background.
What's different about? I said, what's different about today then?
Yeah. This is going to be a little bit more doom and gloom apocalypse stuff. But first of all, the background, for those who don't know, because you've been living in Iraq somewhere, former President Trump was indicted, I believe, on 37 felony counts regarding the classified documents that were found in Mar-a-Lago. He was indicted in South Florida. He is going to be appearing on Tuesday in front of a judge that he appointed. So that's going to be interesting. And the federal prosecutor involved, I can't remember the guy's name off the top of my head, is promising a speedy trial. You know, what the definition of speedy is, I don't know. I mean, Alvin Bragg in New York, that trial doesn't even start until December of 2023. Oddly enough, you know, about a month before the New Hampshire primary. Shocking.
Yeah, weird how that worked out.
So that's what's going on with that. Let me preface all of this by saying what I'm about to talk about is not advocation. It is simply observation and what I really think is going to happen. I'm not advocating this. For one of the few times in my life, I'm actually hoping and praying to God I'm wrong. But I don't think I am. Maybe I am. We'll see, but I don't think I am. All right. First broad statement, and I can't believe I'm about to say this, but I now believe that a civil war is all but inevitable in the United States. I don't see a way out of it. For starters, what this has done, and you and I, you know, you're like me, we're both DeSantis guys. We both like Ron DeSantis. But what this has probably done has guaranteed Trump the Republican nomination for president. Because people are going to have a tribal rally around the flag effect. I still won't vote for him in the primary, but I think people are going to rally around him enough to push him all the way through the general election. Through to the general election. Let me rephrase. I think his nomination is all but assured at this point, and I think the Democrats intended that to be the case because I think they believe, probably correctly, that he's the easiest candidate to beat. So they're pushing to have him be the Republican nominee. Now, based off of that, I have 3 nightmare scenarios. Which would you like me to hear first, Coop? The 2 least likely ones or the most likely scenario?
Let's go least scary to most scary.
Oh, I can't go least scary. I can go least likely, but they're all scary.
All right, so yeah, let's do the old military decision-making process then, the old MDMP. Go ahead and go with the well, that's least favorable course of action. Go ahead and go with the least likely. Okay,
there's 2 of them and they're kind of intertwined. The Democrats have kind of pumped up Trump to try to get him the GOP nomination, playing on the stupidity of Republican voters to nominate somebody because they want to give the Democrats a big middle finger. And they're playing with fire. And what I mean by that is, let's say, let me back up. The Republicans kind of supported Joe Biden in the South Carolina Democratic primary because they did not want Bernie Sanders to even have a shot of getting the nomination because they did not want him to have a shot at the presidency. Democrats are kind of playing the reverse game. Let's say that all of this stuff, let's say the economy gets bad enough or something happens in the world, Ukraine goes off the rails, or something happens with China, or let's say that the border crisis gets so severe that Trump actually wins the election. Now, I don't believe Trump can turn out any new voters. What I think the most likely scenario is that the Biden voters would not come out to vote. Now, I don't know that that's very likely, but I think that's Trump's best hope is the Biden voters, because a lot of them, I think when I last read, somewhere around 50% of them don't even want him to run for a second term. So if they get so disgusted, they stay home or they vote for RFK Jr. Trump could pull an inside straight again. So let's say he wins the presidency. Well, there are 2 branch nightmares off of that. The first is he comes in having been indicted and is looking for some kind of vengeance, whatever you want to call it, and goes on a firing fest and fires everybody. He's already said he's going to do that, but this time he actually follows through. He fires about 75% of the federal bureaucracy. And let's be generous and say 50% of the military GOs. How do you think the federal bureaucracy is going to react to that, the mass firing of careerists who, I mean, look, you're taking away everything they have. So Are they just going to sit there and take it? I don't think so. I think that there's going to be a mass firing fest that's going to go on if he wins the presidency. Now, the second branch off of that, everybody decries January 6th, and correctly, in my opinion. Now, I don't think Trump orchestrated it. I think it was 800 to 1,000 morons that tried to storm the Capitol because they had a riot, and they were idiots, and almost all of them are in jail. But let's reverse that scenario. Let's say Trump does win and Democrats lose their minds and do something during the counting of the electoral votes the next January 6th, or with Kamala Harris or something, and they deny him the presidency based off of that. If that happens, a civil war starts on the spot. Because at that point, it'll simply confirm all of the worst fears of Republican or flyover state voters. So Trump winning the presidency to start this is, I think, the least likely scenario. But if he wins the presidency because people are so annoyed with Joe Biden or they don't show up, I think that, like I said, either they deny him the presidency and the spark starts there, or he fires 3/4 of the federal bureaucracy and half of the upper echelon of the military officers. I had a guy try to engage me and tell me that if he tries to do a purge like Stalin, I mean, Stalin's purges weren't firing people. Stalin's purges were starving and killing people, but hey, whatever.
Yeah, I've seen that too. That's so fucking stupid.
But
I have something to say about Stalin later on here in the podcast.
But they were saying that, that he hopes the military would rein him in. I'm like, dude, you're advocating now for the military to overthrow the duly elected civilian authority. That's a civil war right there. And what I've always said, people always said, well, folks can't stand up to the military. Well, let me tell you, in the event of an actual American Civil War, my prediction for what happens with the United States military, roughly 40% of the military will follow orders and do what they're told to do and try and destroy the rebellion, whatever that means. I believe about 35% of the military will simply quit and go home. I don't think that they'll want to engage at all. And I believe roughly 25% of the military will actively join the opposing side. So now it's a matter of who controls the bases.
What was that last percentage here?
About 25% will actively join the opposing side. And then you're looking at, who controls, the weapons facilities, who controls the ammunition storage, who controls the logistics, the lines of communication, that kind of stuff. And that's going to get really messy really fast. So that was what would happen if we actually if the military tried to do something on whatever side that is. So that's my take on the least likely scenario with two branches if Trump, wins the election.
Right.
Your thoughts?
Yeah, I have a few thoughts. Well, I'll come back around to DeSantis. I think we'll talk about that a little bit later on, because I have a bunch of thoughts about DeSantis and the primary and all that kind of thing. The mass firings, I don't think it matters who the president is, unless it's, well, we know that none of these wiener dogs, these 1990 type conservatives like Nikki Haley and all these other idiots that are running right now, Chris Christie, are going to win. There's no chance of them winning.
No, it's a DeSantis-Trump race.
It's a DeSantis-Trump race.
Trump has a 25 to 30% hardcore base that's going to vote for him no matter what.
Right. So you said something really important, though. You said that Trump is not going to gain any votes. He can't possibly. He has hit his ceiling in the last election. Now, he did garner more votes than any candidate in history other than Joe Biden in that last election. Oh, by the way, but he's hit his ceiling. He's lost voters, though. He has, like you, like me, like some other people that are tired of the antics, tired of the drama, tired of the bullshit, and really honestly think that DeSantis would be a much, much better chief executive by far and away, because he's proven it. He's proven it. In Florida, by far and away, I would say the most successful state in the country right now on any metric as far as improvements, as far as prior to DeSantis now. So I think DeSantis would go in there and do a sweeping mass firing as well. He's a principled human being, although Trump is his opponent. there's not a lot of difference in execution of policy between what I see Trump doing and what I see DeSantis doing. Trump is an idiot, but as far as how he handles this and how he treats DeSantis, I think if DeSantis was a front runner and Trump was genteel, there'd be a much different discussion going on. Because, ladies and gentlemen that love Trump, I get it, but he's coming at DeSantis from a more far left, and I'm talking about DeSantis.
He's attacking DeSantis from the left, which is weird.
Yeah, he's coming at him from the left. As far as you're talking about, like January 6th and all of that kind of thing, and I'm going to get into this in a PowerPoint slide. I got to do a PowerPoint slide, Russ. You know,
of course.
What's going on with this indictment and possible imprisonment that the left is trying to do that supports something like 68% of Democrats agree with the indictment and all this stuff. This is, you talk about January 6th being a threat to democracy. Shut up your ass. This is actually the threat to democracy. And we'll get into that, Russ, here in a little bit as to why. As far as the Civil War goes in the military, one thing that I've always hated about Hollywood, and because Hollywood is run by the left, is in every single one of these dystopian movies or the mass virus outbreak movies or shit goes down movies, 99% of the military follows, or well, they always get the uniforms wrong, and they always have the Mandarin collars up, and they don't have the rank or anything on right, and you know, all that anyway. So that shows you how much attention to detail, you know, one goddamn E4 on set could square all this away, by the way. It wouldn't have to be some high-ranking NCO or officer as your expert on set, as your advisor. But every time they show these things, it's always like, you know, the Army, and they're always in the wrong uniforms, by the way. It's like the Marines are in the Army uniforms and the Army is in something else. And they're not in the right vehicles and they have M16s from the Vietnam era. They have like A1s and shit like that. But what they really get wrong is the demeanor and the whole ideology and the whole culture of the military. Everybody's a dick except for maybe one guy who shows some compassion, who allows the heroine or the hero or the protagonist that little break, you know, or shows that come on, here, hurry up. It wouldn't be like that. We have thinkers, and we have, well, at least in our day, thinkers and human beings in the military who are loyal to the country. Not to the government, to the country. Took an oath of office, not to the government, but to the country, the citizens, the Constitution. Constitution. It is not going to be like that. It will not be a bunch of not clones, but a bunch of what am I trying to say? A bunch of robots out there.
Automatons, yeah.
Automatons doing what they're told to do. There would be an ethical dilemma among everybody but the most stalwartly stupid soldiers and sailors and airmen and Marines. So if this is what the left is planning on doing, you are really, 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 really mistaken about the support you would get from the standing army. I realize that the left has infiltrated our federal law enforcement agencies. That's been obvious for quite some time. The FBI, the NSA, all these other idiots that have been infiltrated, in my opinion, by the left. That became very apparent during the Trump administration with Comey and some of the antics that have happened since. Would love to get into what's going on with the subpoenas of Joe Biden and all that, but we'll get into that some other time. I think you're right. My percentages would be skewed even a little higher, that I think a lot of the soldiers would actually go towards the other side. I really do, because I bet you if you took a poll even right now in woke America about the number of people, let's just say the Army, number of soldiers, percentage that are loyal, that would be more loyal to, say, Trump, that are Trump voters than, say, a Biden administration or a Kamala administration, the numbers would be vastly, vastly high on the Trump side, of course. The whole idea of the military being able to command, to take over the country, really, Russ, do you know just off the top of your head what percent of the population is active or even reserve forces in the United States? The percent?
It's less than 1%.
Less than 1%. And I can tell you the 99%, 30% of those people are incredibly well armed.
Yeah.
And we got our independence from Britain by understanding our terrain, by being guerrilla fighters, all of that. The military would not have a chance. Do they have the technology? It wouldn't matter. It wouldn't matter. Go into where you went to college in some of those rural places, like where I live out here in logging country and farm country in Washington, where the mountains are steep and the boys are so well armed, it's not even funny. So I'm not trying to be a prepper or any of those kind of weird things. I'm just saying it would be a ridiculously tilted fight. The military would never be able to command the geographic portion of this country. It's impossible, and they're not going to put nukes on our soil or something crazy like that. It's not going to happen. And if you tried to wedge the boys out here in up here in the Cascade Mountains, these logger boys out here, out of where they grew up and what they have, good luck trying to get them to surrender. It just would piss them off more. So it's a no-win scenario as far as a civil war goes. And I mean that across the board. It's a lose scenario. And I can tell you the left is not going to be the victors in any way, shape, or form on this. If that were a possibility, it can't happen.
Yeah. A couple of things on what you said. First of all, the reason I don't put the percentages different than you, the reason I put the percentages the way I do, is even in the military, you got to look at people who are individual initiative. Most people have to be spurred to action. And when I say that, most people will go with the status quo, or they'll just not want to. It's probably not the right phrase, but it's the only one that comes to mind. Get their hands dirty. That's why I put the 40% that'll follow orders and the 35% that will just try to quit and go home. That's why I think the momentum is in that direction. Now, when you talk about they'll follow orders. You and I have both commanded soldiers, and I think that some of the funniest things we hear from the civilian sector is when folks say, "Well, you didn't necessarily have a lot of leadership going on because they had to do what you told them." I'm like, yeah, that shows someone who has never been around private Spec 4s, E5s. Yeah, you can do that, and they'll do exactly what you told them, and they'll do nothing else. They won't go any further above and beyond, and they will find ways to undermine you. Because they have this thing called a mind of their own.
Exactly, which is a good thing for the most part. Which is a good thing.
It is, but it will. You will become very frustrated very quickly if you're like, well, I mean, if you want to do that, then build a bunch of Terminators, because the American soldier doesn't operate that way. They just don't.
Right.
It's our individual initiative and some of the ways we've changed that actually undergird part of our military strength. And the last point, we talked about the military numbers, whether one side or the other. It is. I'm just doing a military analysis now. Again, this is not avocation. Controlling the blue areas, for lack of a better term, would be a lot easier because all you have to do is isolate. What you mostly have to do is isolate the urban centers, and you can do that by controlling key interstate interchanges outside of, say, Atlanta, Philadelphia, St. Louis, the I-5 corridor in California, that kind of thing. When it comes to controlling the red areas, you're looking at, even though the population sizes are roughly equal, the land area is not. The land area in the red area is much more spread out, and that's where the farms are. That's where the oil refineries are. I think the only logistical advantage that the left would have might be in the medical field. But when you look at whether it's food or producing fuel or producing ammo or those with knowledge of maintenance, again, wars are won logistically. That's how the North beat the South. It wasn't great maneuvers. Grant simply clubbed the South to death with Northern resources. And controlling such a wide swath of area where you would have to, in order to gain control of the levers that would be necessary to create the pressure, because war is not just about going out and killing people. That's not the objective of war. The objective of war is to change behavior. And we seem to forget, and this is on both sides. We talk about doing, we crush them in a matter of weeks, which is, again, ironically what both the North and the South said during the Civil War. We've had a difficult enough time crushing, some insurgents in Iraq and Afghanistan, and prior to that, Vietnam, who were armed with a little bit small arms and a few improvised explosive devices. And people need to realize, again, on both sides, a war inside the United States is not going to have a rules of engagement. Okay? It's going to get really nasty, really fast. No one's going to pop off nukes on American soil. That's just not going to happen. You're going to have to do it with boots on the ground. And it's going to get very messy You and I have seen how messy nations that have civil wars get.
Yeah.
And so folks that, it's reminiscent of, the newspaper headlines of the March to Richmond in May of 1861. It's not going to be, it wouldn't be over that fast. There's no dedicated center of gravity right now, really for either side, but certainly more for the red side. The blue side, and I'm not playing down the left. What I'm saying is that the left is usually more concentrated in cities. The right is not. They're more spread out into more rural areas. So trying to pin down is going to be a little bit more challenging.
Yeah, I completely agree. You and I both have spent a lot of years not just being tactical experts, but studying the strategic viewpoint, the 20,000-foot view, as they say, and to actually be able to control the United States of America, there's no power on planet Earth that logistically can do that. Like you said, the resources, the natural resources, are certainly in the hands of red areas. Absolutely, are concentrated in red areas, and even things like I live up here in hydroelectric country. Unfortunately, we sell most of that hydroelectric power to those Californians, and those aren't located in the cities, folks. Those hydroelectric dams are not located in the cities, by the way. It's just there's no strategic way that could ever happen. And I know I don't want to scare everybody and think that we're a couple of preppers or a couple of doomsayers or a couple of nationalists who are preaching this. It's an interesting topic, and it's actually really scary because I agree with you. If you don't mind, can I throw up a slide? We were going to talk about this, and I think this will give us further talking points on this topic.
Yeah.
Unless you want to finish your thoughts on the trail that you're on right now, and I want to stay on the topic.
Yeah, and then I'll go into the most likely scenario after that.
It sounds good. Yeah, I think that'll kind of feed into that. Let me just throw up a. Well, hey everybody, this is Coop, the handsome and debonair one of the Two Grumpy Bastards podcast. Not to mention I'm the only one that's an actual bastard. Google that shit. Don't, actually. Hey, I'm here to do a shameless plug for our merchandise. You can find us at twogrumpybastardsmerchandise.com. We got a whole bunch of new merchandise in. I think you'll like some of the new choices. There's some pro-Second Amendment. There's some anti-Washington State Governor stuff on there. I think you'll really appreciate it. New stuff coming all the time. I have 2 great designs in the works, so please, to support this podcast, that's one of the easiest ways to do it. We're also on Etsy. Yeah, I know, Etsy. You can find our products on eBay as well. Storm King Mercantile is the name of the store there that fronts us. And there's many, many other ways to support this podcast, of course. We have a Patreon page, same thing, Two Grumpy Bastards. We certainly would appreciate you following us on Instagram. Most of you probably know we have a Facebook page, Two Grumpy Bastards Podcast. We have a lot of fun over there, a lot of frivolity, a lot of memes, and a lot of hard-hitting news, believe it or not. A lot of great people in that group. Also, all of the social media outlets, including now on TikTok. You can find us there. And one of the things that I really wanted to tell you is if you have any feedback for Russ, especially because he kind of sucks, feel free to email us at twogrumpybastards@gmail.com. That's the easiest way to get a hold of us, or you can always leave us a comment or an IM on, or DM, I should say. See, I'm so savvy. I'm so savvy. On our Facebook page. So we really appreciate you listening or watching us over there on YouTube as well. And we hope you do both, because Russ is something to look at. I said something. I didn't say something really great to look at. Anyway, thanks for listening. This is your intrepid, amazing, and grateful host of the Two Grumpy Bastards podcast, Coop. Remember, keep your focus and stay wokeless.